Welcome back, everybody, to another Swift programming tutorial. This is part 14 of our basics series, and in this tutorial we're going to go over structs. The good news is, if you're familiar with Swift classes, then you are already familiar with much of what structs can do. Now, there are some differences between classes and structs, so let's go over what classes and structs have in common and what their differences are. A few of the main things classes and structs have in common is that both can have properties, methods, subscripts, and initializers. Both are capable of being extended, and both can conform to protocols. One of the main differences between classes and structs is that classes have inheritance. So for example, a class can be subclassed, whereas in its strict definition, a struct cannot. Another main difference between classes and structs is that classes are reference types, and that means that data is referenced from an existing instance, whereas structs are considered value types, and when you use value types, the values that pertain to that type are typically copied. So basically, when you use classes, a reference to the same existing instance is used instead of being copied, and when you use structs, the values are copied as needed. Okay, so when do you use structs? A few guidelines to consider are: you can use structs when you don't need to inherit data or functionality from another type, or when you need to encapsulate a small number of simple data values, and also when you expect the values in the struct to be copied rather than referenced. A couple other notes regarding structs. Structs get an automatic initializer, and we'll show you an example of that here in just a second. And our last note, some struct functions may need the mutating keyword if they will mutate or change your struct properties. Okay? We're going to keep this tutorial pretty simple. However, we will get into more of the details regarding these notes for classes and structs in future tutorials. Now let's show you how to create a basic struct. So the syntax for a struct looks like this. You can use the reserved or keyword struct, then give your struct a name. Structs, like classes, typically start with an uppercase letter, and then inside your curly brackets, you put your code. So here we have a simple example of a struct. We have named it triangle. We have created our variables of type double. And this is what we were talking about earlier when we said that structs get an automatic initializer. So instead of using an init, like you may be familiar with in classes, when we create an instance of this struct, we will get an automatic initializer where we can designate our values here, but we'll get back to that here in just a second. So in this triangle struct, we've also created a function. And what will happen when we create an instance of this triangle struct is that we'll ask for our base and height values, and then we can apply our function to that instance, and it will give us the area of that triangle based on the base and height measurements. Okay, here we have created our instance. We've called it triangle1. Then we reference our struct, and we put in our base and height values. So the base of this triangle is 12, and the height is 5. And then we reference our instance, we use a dot, and we apply our function, and our function will apply the area formula, and then we use a print to display the final outcome. So this code right here should give us our string with the base and height and the area. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so you can see down here in the console, we get our output, which tells us that the area of a triangle with a base of 12 and a height of 5 is 30. Okay, so that's all we have for this Swift tutorial on structs. We will be doing many more Swift programming tutorials in the near future. Join us for those, and we'll see you next time.